Good day, folks. Uh, I'm Dan Swafford. I am a program assistant at Virginia Tech, and I want to get you started on our unit on Introduction to uh, Precision Agriculture. And before that, I want to talk about some concepts that we need to understand before we can start studying about what precision agriculture is. I want to call this unit Introduction to Agriculture. And again, these are some things that we can learn about agricultural resources that are available through Virginia View, the organization which has sponsored this. In this first lesson, we're going to look at what plants need in order to grow. A lot of times you'd think, well, why are we studying about what plants need in order to grow? We need to know about what plants need to grow in order that when we practice precision agriculture, that we're supplying those needs for those plants. We need to learn what farmers look at as far as quality production. How do we know what a good yield is? If we're flying over here and we're using these aircraft, and it says, okay, it looks like you might have an estimated yield of 50 bushels, 100 bushels, 150, 200 bushels for whatever crop that we're going to be studying. We got to have an idea as a student, as a student of agriculture of what is a good yield. And then we need to know what kind of inputs are going to affect those yields. If we go out there and we've got a crop of corn and it looks like it's going to have a 100 bushel yield, do we need to add nutrients? And if not, we can save the money that we don't need for those inputs. If 150 or 200 bushel yield is great, as far as an estimate, do we need to do any more? And finally, we need to know how we can affect and enhance the soil. Not too long ago, I was in a supermarket and I was looking at buying some vegetables for the house for supper. And a lady comes up to me and she says, "Sir, can I bother you?" I go, "Okay, what do you need?" She goes, "Can you tell me what an organic dirt is?" What is meant by organic dirt? Well, this video will help you understand what an organic dirt is. She goes, "Where can I find organic dirt?" And we learned to answer all these questions. I thought it was so cool that here I was less than 2 weeks from making this video, and I was answering the questions that would come out through the video. Now, folks, I got some questions I want to ask you all before we go farther. What are some things that plants need? Now, if you look up at the screen, the first one that we have listed, yeah, that's a good answer, sun. Why do plants need sun? Well, we all know they need sun for photosynthesis. They need sun for the plants to grow. We all know what plants look like if we have cloudy skies every day. Okay, next one, and we all know this is water. I like this guy's little galosses up here. We got to have water. Plants aren't going to grow without it. And we're going to have soil. Now, I was telling the story about the lady in the supermarket calling it dirt. And throughout our whole conversation, I tried to get her to change her language from dirt to soil. I always say soil is something that contributes to plant growth. Now, the last one is very important. It says lots of love, protection against pests, weeds, and disease. Now, folks, as we talk about precision agriculture, this becomes very important because as we fly over with our different aircraft, we want to be able to recognize those areas which have problems with pests, problems with weeds, and problems with disease. And from the air, we ought to be able to see this. Let's look over to the cartoon. What is that guy in the ball cap, the man on the left, trying to say? You're going to have to say you're going to have to put the right fertilizer on for the right crop. You know, here we got the guy on the left. What is he trying to grow? He's trying to grow trees. He's got an orchard. Could be an apple tree, pear tree, whatever, where the man on the right is trying to grow broccoli. How many in this room like broccoli? You and my wife. But she was so excited. We'd got some new broccoli in at the grocery store. Okay. Now, crop yields. Now, we were talking about this a little bit a few minutes ago. Crop yields often measured by volume. Can anybody tell me how much a bushel of corn weighs? 56 pounds. Okay. It varies between ear corn and shelled corn, 156, 160. Crop yields are often measured by the unit of land, which we call what? Yeah, that's right, in the back of the room. Acres. Now, we'll talk about this in a little more. Acres, about the size of a football field. I like the yield examples we give here. 150 bushels of corn per acre. Now, ladies and gentle people, when I was your age, 50, 60 years ago, yield was about 100 bushel acre. I remember growing up in the 60s, if we had 100 bushel yield of corn, that was great. Now we talk about 150, 250, 200 bushels. Soybeans, when I grew up, they were 25, now they're 40. And then it says 80 bales of hay per acre. Now, what size of bale is that, though? What you guys think about that? Yield will depend on what crop it is. And again, when you're flying over precision ag, you're able to give you some estimates to the farmer. Okay, how are we going to change those yields? Well, first thing we want to do is do some inputs. We're going to do some fertilizer. Sometimes we call it plant food. It says farmers cannot control the amount of solar energy. We can't lengthen the day. The orbit around the sun and the position of the earth can change the day. I was thinking this morning, I got up early and I was sitting there on the recliner reading the newspaper, and I said, when is the sun going to come up? My puppies got me up at 8 o'clock, and 8 o'clock, 6 o'clock, and I'm waiting there for an hour and a half before the sun comes up. Right now, we're in the equinox. The sun comes up 7:30, goes down at 7:30. Okay, plant food. We said another word for plant food was what? Fertilizers. Okay, we got the major elements, or the macronutrients and the micronutrients. Both of them are important. Now, there's a lot of problems with this one. A lot of times people will say, okay, give me the major elements. Okay, N, P, and K, nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. Now, these are the elements that are important and they're needed in large amounts. Now, we also have the minor elements, and we'll talk about that in just a few minutes, as far as they're important, but we don't need them in large amounts. They're still important, but we don't need them in as large amounts. And now, folks, when you look at a bag of fertilizer, now the teacher will be moving this around a little bit for you. If you need these in large amounts, they're going to be put on the bag of plant food or fertilizer, always in the same order. The first number, look at that number up in the upper right hand of the screen, 16. 16% of that bag is going to be active nutrients are going to be nitrogen. 4% phosphorus, And the last one, 8% potassium. Always presented in that number. Okay. As we look at these, you're going to say, okay, if we had a 100-pound bag of fertilizer, how many pounds of phosphorus are going to be in there? 4. If it's a 50-pound bag, how much is going to be in there? And you're going to look at the guy in the back row and you're going to say, 2, because it's a 50-pound bag. And that's what you're going to buy most of the time. None of us are going to be lifting around, well, some of us are, 100-pound bags. When we list about 50-pound bag, or it's going to be brought out in the back of a truck in bulk. But you always need that percentage of the total weight of that bag in that order. Here, 7% nitrogen, 15% phosphorus, 19% potassium. Okay, minor elements, and you see a whole bunch. Now, folks, these are minor elements can include, and it says, again, folks, you don't need them in large amounts, okay? Small amounts. Okay, we got calcium, sulfur, iron, boron, copper, and zinc. Who in this room can tell me, and I'm going to ask you a couple of questions on these. The importance of sulfur. Anybody know? What about iron? Give you something to think about tonight. Boron. Again, you might see one listed on the front of the bag there, contains iron. Folks, these are needed in small amounts, but still important. Okay, plants require large amounts of the major elements, smaller amounts of the minor elements, but they still got to have both. They still have to have both. Commercial fertilizers, again, NP and K. What are the percentages here? Okay, this is a good one. 20, 0, and 6. That's percentage. Now, if we talked about this was a 50-pound bag, the total amount of that element would be half of that. In other words, here we got a 50-pound bag of fertilizer. It's got 20% nitrogen. How many pounds of nitrogen are going to be in this bag? 10. Cut all those numbers in half. Okay. Which is the best fertilizer? Exactly right to the top of this slide, folks. Take your soil, have it tested. In all our counties here in the state, the local extension office will take those samples, you bring them in, and they will send them off to the state lab just down the hall from us here, and we'll let you know what they need. Now, the nice thing about this, you're flying over it and you say, oh, man, this corner of the field doesn't look very good. So you send out the people on the ground to get samples from that area, send them off and say, oh, you need to add some more nitrogen. How could we tell that? Okay, nitrogen, you're flying over, dark green color. If it's right. If it's wrong, it's going to be pale. This is we're flying over the fields. You can see the different colors. You say, oh, right here in the field, it's real light green. We need to add some nitrogen. Always tell folks, nitrogen makes things grow fast and turns it dark green. Okay, we can have nitrogen deficiencies, and we can also have where nitrogen, we have too much of it. Here, become yellow leaves, light color, and we have slow growth. So again, you're flying over with your drone. Oh, this area is not as tall as the other. We need to add some more nitrogen. And then you look at the kids because we want it to grow and to turn green. Now, phosphorus, again, growth, cell division, seeds, and flowers. If you want a lot of seed, what crop do we plant that we want a lot of seed? And you say, okay, we've got our soybeans, we got our vegetable crops in the garden. Corn, we want a lot of seed. Beans, we want a lot of seed. Now, hastens plant maturity. How many days does it take a crop to grow? Think about it. We plant a crop of corn the 1st of May, so we got May, June, July, August, at least 4 months, a little bit over 100 days. So here we live here, we don't have to worry too much about maturity. You get north of us, you want to hasten that maturity, so you increase the amount of phosphorus. Phosphorus is one of those things we really can live without sometimes. If you go down to a farm supply and you see crops that have you see a bag of fertilizer that has analysis of 30-0-0. Where would you put a fertilizer like that? 30-0-0. 30% nitrogen, 0% phosphorus, 0% potassium. In your front yard. In your front yard. You want a lot of nitrogen, nice green growth, nice fast growth. Okay. And again, phosphorus, if you don't have enough of it, plants turn purple, reduced flower and seed production. Okay, you got a choice. You've got a garden in the backyard, lawn in front. What kind of fertilizer are you going to put on that garden? 30-0-0 or 15-10-10? It's going to be the second one because you're going to need that phosphorus. If you get too much nitrogen on your garden, the fruit is going to turn soft. You're going to have soft tomatoes, soft. My wife went to the grocery store yesterday and bought a watermelon that was as big as a softball because she was not going to let me have any of it. So she said, I'm just going to get a little watermelon. You get too much nitrogen on a watermelon, it's going to be a soft melon. Too much on a pumpkin, it's going to be soft. Okay, last one, potassium. Okay, protects against disease, helps with chlorophyll, essential for tuber development. Guy on the back row. What's a tuber? Right, you got a potato. Okay, see on the bottom there, it says very important for root crops, carrots, peanuts, potatoes, radishes, and turnips. My wife, when I left the house this morning, was fixing a root plant salad. Now, what do you think she had in that salad? All those things listed there at the bottom of the screen. Okay, wrap this up. We got plant deficiencies. We see all kinds of them over there. You look at those light green leaves. If we have a plant that has light green leaves, what is it short on? Lady on the back row. What is it? What is it? Nitrogen. Going to have to add some nitrogen. Remember, nitrogen turns things green and makes it grow. Okay. Uh, Soils, and this is where our study of precision agriculture is going to come in. Even in the same field, are going to have different amounts of these elements. Make sure you take enough samples when you take your soil samples to come up with different amounts of that fertilizer to be put in different places in the field. You know, if you've got a 100-acre field, which is large around here, let's drop that down to 10 acres. There's going to be different areas in that field where you might want to let a little more nitrogen over here, a little less over here, more phosphorus over here, more potassium over here. Okay, last thing, soil acidity. I like this slide. I think it's great. Lower the pH, raise the pH, very easy to do. Look over on the right side at the top of the screen. It says in agriculture, sulfur will lower the pH. That lowers it. Usually, we talk about lowering the pH as far as getting it closer to 7. Raise the pH, we're going to add lime and get it closer to 7. And a lot of times we get confused when we try to figure out which is going up and which is going down. Most crops are going to like a pH around 7. You get above that, you want to lower it towards 7. You get below that, you want to raise it towards 7. Okay, and this is what we were talking about before. pH 1 to 14. Usually, we like a 7 pH as being neutral. It's neither acid or base. It's in the middle. It's close to 7. So if you get a soil test back and it says 7, that's good. If you get one that goes back, most of the time, this side of the Mississippi River, we're going to have pHs lower than 7. You get west of the Mississippi, you're going to have pHs that are going to be closer, that are going to be above 7. So wherever you're at, you want to get that pH back to around 7. Okay. I always like to say, people say, well, why is it important for me to have a pH of 7? It allows plants to use high pHs or low pHs, depending on the plant. Some plants like a high pH, some like a low pH. Usually we like to say if the pH is way beyond one of those two sides of 7, the plants are going to have a lower yield. Here's a good estimate of what pH is. And if you look at this screen, these are mostly garden crops. Blueberries, 5.5 to 4. Tomatoes, asparagus, corn. Again, all around, most of them around that 7 mark, 6.5 to 7.5. I always like, people come up to me and they'll say, well, Swaff, what the plant, I'm going, a lot of plants won't be able to tell the difference between a pH of 6 and a pH of 7, as long as you're keeping it around that 7 mark. Now, if you got a patch of blueberries in a field where the pH is 7, you got issues. But for the most part, if you look at that screen, you keep it close to 7, everything's going to do pretty good. Okay. We talked a lot here about how we can increase the yields by increasing the amount of fertilizer or decreasing certain inputs. You put too much of anyone, it will run into the streams. You noticed, and this is a good idea as far as you guys, how many people in here mow lawns for money? See some hands. Yep, John's got some hands going up. This is why, and I'm going to call my guy that does my lawn care for me. This is why you want to buy that bag of 3000 to put on your yard. Phosphorus, that middle number. If you have a lot of runoff of phosphorus into your water, creeks, that type of thing, will cause real issues. And plus, by taking out that nutrient, phosphorus, you're actually saving money. Again, thank you very much. If you have any questions, the adults in this group should be able to answer them for you. Remember what we talked about as far as plants always needing sun, water, soil, and plant food or fertilizer. I think it's real important that when you walk into a store with your folks, that you can look down, or your adults can look down and say, oh, there's a bag of fertilizer. It's real high in nitrogen. That's what I want to put in my yard. Or it's got a high middle number. That's what I want to put in my garden or in my field for my crops. Thank you very much for your attention. Have a good one.